Okay, go.
Are you guys ready for the final
Yes,
answer?
please give it. Fingers crossed, guys.
All of you were wrong.
No way! No way!
Hi guys, welcome back to WTF What the Future podcast. I'm Annette.
And I'm John.
And this is a show where we tackle difficult topics together with experts. So joining us today are two very special guests, Rachel and Sean.
Welcome.
Thank you for having us on the show.
Hi. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Rachel. Definitely not an expert by any means.
Expert to us.
Okay lah, thank you. We
You
see
know
how
what you
this
do
goes.
for a
We'll see
living.
how this goes. I work at Google and I do government affairs, public policy for Singapore.
Yeah, hi, my name is Sean. I'm also not an expert. I work on AI policy and health tech policy in open government products. We are a product development team in the Singapore government.
So you're not an expert doing that job lah?
Yes, definitely not.
Sounds like a job for an expert.
Just a regular public servant.
Okay,
you know?
okay. So like people like us could have done the job. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, like, welcome to
AI
our
might change that.
Okay, we're gonna start off with our very first question already. I think we've had a lot of fun just warming up. So my first question is, what are some of the jobs that you think won't be disrupted by AI?
I'm a biochemist by training, and so when I was in college, I spent like a year and a half of my life trying to figure out a protein structure on a lab bench, all those like test tubes and whatnot.
Wow.
And then I realized now our AlphaFold model can do that in 20 minutes by putting in the genetic sequence. And I'm like,
Oh dear.
how many years of my life have I
Oh, dear.
wasted?
Oh,
I mean,
gosh.
obviously that was like back in the day. So like just a classic example of how things will change and evolve. It doesn't mean that scientists are not necessary, but I will not spend 1.5 years of my life doing something like that, right?
Yeah.
So I think it gives us space to do some of the more creative stuff, the more deep thinking kind of work that humans are particularly good at, and it saves us from all the rote, stuff that requires a lot of data crunching, which we are not better than machines at.
Right.
So I decided to write this poem with Gemini. I mean, I didn't write it. I got Gemini, an AI program, to write a poem about my grandfather for me. I'm going to compare a snippet of that poem with a snippet of an actual poem that I wrote about my grandfather when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
Okay.
And you're going to guess which one is mine and which one
Okay.
was written by the AI.
That's
So
what's
one
happening.
is AI, one is a poem I wrote when I was 10 years old, but I
Okay.
must also disclaim that I won an NLB prize for it.
Wow.
It was first
Okay,
runner.
okay.
I was first runner up.
Okay.
Okay.
It's not like 10-year-old, really
Okay.
10-year-old, okay?
But then again, this was 20 years ago lah, right? So okay, all good. You go.
First one, poem
Okay.
number one. Grandpa, oh grandpa, a jester so grand, with a twinkle in his eye and a joke always at hand. His stories outlandish, his puns never tame. He leaves us in stitches, erupting in flame. Okay, this is just a segment of the first poem.
Wow, you
Okay.
wrote this when you were 10. That's
Segment,
crazy.
Yeah, possible.
segment of the second poem. My grandfather and his friends are a funny lot who like to talk a lot. I guess from him I inherited this gene, as I am not one who is very serene. Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
I think
I
number
know
2 was
already.
generated.
Yeah,
I think number 2 was
I think
generated.
So too.
Because
Yeah.
it sounds like the kind of framing that Google Nest generates when they tell jokes to my 6-year-old daughter.
Oh my gosh.
There's this like,
She works at Google.
I don't know, man, but this is what my daughter, the dad is tone of the jokes.
No, I also think that the second one is generated, mostly because I feel if you are in a poetry competition, you really want to give a lot of thought, and number one sounds like there's a lot of heart in it.
John, what's your
I also think it's number 2 purely because
Why everybody has the same answer?
because it's a language model. So when you type a poem, right, I think it will just try to make itself rhyme whether or not it makes perfect sense. And I think the serene part was not perfect sense. Yeah.
That's
And then
Are
you
we
are a
right?
very intelligent young woman.
Okay,
Which
are you
is
ready for the
jester
final?
at 10 years old. Okay,
Are you
go.
guys
Okay, yeah.
are you guys ready for the final
Yes,
answer?
please give it. Fingers crossed, guys.
All of you were wrong.
No way! No way! No way!
Oh no!
You know, I thought about just saying one just to be different.
should have gone with your gut. Should have gone with your gut.
Oh my god, told me to.
Why do you get to say answer? At least someone give something different lah.
Yeah, as in, why was your
God.
poem so
Why
bad?
I was 10 years
I
old.
thought you wrote the better one for
I
sure.
was 10 years
But
old.
you said you were 10 years old and you won.
I won the
Yeah,
first
yeah, you
runner
won
up.
the
I
first
was not
runner-up.
the winner. I was
should have known who
second
used
prize, second prize.
jester.
Second prize. Maybe the first prize would have got this would have gone first prize, so I've got second lah. Now I'm very insulted. I have actually a couple surveys that we did with the youth actually in Singapore.
Yeah.
So quite a number of them, 1 in 3 youth feel that there needs to be more regulation for the emerging technology for protecting employment because, I guess it might take over some jobs. And also 1 in 2 youth were concerned with data privacy and digital inclusivity. And I think these are things that they're concerned about, like fairness and bias, cybersecurity, misinformation. What are some things that, maybe as a consumer or, as a young person who's being thrust into this AI world, how can I protect myself?
The reality is it's really quite hard, right, to discern what is real, what is fake online nowadays. It can be really, really convincing. So it dials back to how we discern what is real and what is not real. Right? So for instance, there was a video going around of Senior Minister Lee Hsien Loong, right, and it was a deep fake video. And the advice was don't even share the video, because even if you share it and with a disclaimer that, hey, this is a deep fake, there are still people that will be
believe it.
susceptible to
That's
it.
true.
And
Right,
then that
I
in
mean?
turn affects the algorithm to kind of push up
Exactly.
it and make it cheaper for the scammer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I mean, even if you encounter the video, listen to it, you must have sort of that baseline level of trust to understand, hey, who is this person, and do I believe that that person will actually say such a thing?
I think we have got a collective responsibility, and I think starting from the individual, right? Like, how do we equip ourselves with the right kind of literacy and
Exactly.
asking ourselves the questions that if it triggers an emotion, I should pause before I do anything
Exactly.
about that. What is the source or an origin of this content, for example? So that's the individual, and the collective, don't share, for example. And then as a platform, it is a responsibility to content moderate and make and get it largely right.
I do think that the AI can help us in some good ways, but they always say, right, when there's power, it can be used for good, it can also be used for evil. And we don't watch a lot of movies where AI actually takes over the future. So do you think that there's any truth in that, or is it just fiction? Will we end up in a dystopian, Wall-E?
Or are we a misstep away from that?
AI governance definitely is something that we take seriously. We must be very humble in acknowledging what we can regulate, what we can't regulate. But at the same time, we can't leave it to the law of the jungle. You can't just leave it to, we'll see, whatever happens, happens. No, because then you're telling everyone that develops AI that might is right. But you need to understand that AI has a lot of hidden biases, based upon the data set that's being used to train them. And we need to be aware of this so that we can consciously guard against it.
How does big tech or how does government regulations, policy writers, right, make sure that we don't cross that line of interfering with the possible development of new technology?
No system will be perfect also, right? So I think we put in as many ways to predict risk and to prevent that. But some mistakes do happen in the wild. Like, I mean, Google is not averse to just sort of talking about our own, our like the generated facial images on Gemini, and then we realized that was wrong, and then we needed to course correct. So that's why Gemini currently still cannot generate faces. So I think it's about being very deliberate around course correction as well to prevent that scenario that you talked about, where missteps are like deliberately left untreated or like undealt with. And I think the point around like the collective consultative approach that I was maybe speak from the company perspective, and then you maybe can chime in on the government perspective. It does really take all of us to dance together to figure out like what is the right tolerance for the society and communities that we live in.
Definitely takes everyone working together, different countries, different companies. It really takes a collective effort to agree upon what we should do and what we can do, what are the red lines that we don't want to cross. So it's this kind of ethics and this kind of dilemmas that the developers themselves have to decide what is that we should do. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something.
Right.
In terms of priority, like whose problem should it be to regulate AI? Like, is it all the same, like government first, or tech companies, then the public, or the public first? And like, how would you rank whose problem is,
I suppose only the regulators can create and drive that regulation. I do think that AI is too important not to regulate well. So I think let's just get it out there in the open. And then the government's approach on how they do that, I think, is the important thing, right? That it is consultative with different parties, including the public, including companies, to figure out what those lines are, right? What are our societal
Yeah.
guidelines that we can agree on?
Ultimately, we also don't want to be too prescriptive about it, right? It's really trying to understand what is the red line. If it's really a red line we see that is harmful to society,
Yeah.
okay, no, like we'll put our foot down and say that we can't have this.
Yeah.
But if not, then it's really a dance together, right? Trying to see companies, developers, and even like your normal everyday person on the street, right? I mean, students themselves, you can also develop AI tools right now. It's really, really easy. Right? It's a collective responsibility as a society.
Really easy, this guy. First of all, my name's Sean, I'm not an expert. Yeah, 10 years old can really easy.
It was at this moment he knew.
Maybe we can go a little more in depth into that. Like, why is it so hard to regulate AI, and how does regulating AI compare to maybe other digital developments in the economy?
So I think part of it is the discourse. So we need to figure out like, how do we raise AI literacy in general so that we can have a collective discourse around things that we commonly understand, and then have the same vocabulary around. And then I think figuring out where the technology is at and what boundaries we want to set, I think that does take time.
It's really the implications that it has on the user, right? So it turns to the practical implications. How do you use the model that's being developed, right, for, let's say, your business, or like the content that you create, right? Are you responsible in doing that? And that moves the liability or responsibility beyond the companies to the individual creators, right? To every one of us, right? How do we discern what is it that we want to have in society?
But I feel like with something so new, we don't know what we don't know, ma. So is it for example going to give off the ethos that we want? Who is the arbiter of said ethos?
Well, ultimately, it comes down to you, right? I mean, ethos is something that we as a society agree upon, right? That's how you build like your set of values and social compact.
And in a way, I think Singapore's approach on defining AI as tech for good from Singapore for the world, I think that's a very motivating phrase. I mean,
is that actual tagline?
It literally is.
Fantastic, sounds great.
Yeah, it's from the National AI Strategy 2.0 that was published late last year. And I think that for me as a Singaporean and working in tech, I think that's incredibly empowering, right? Because you're trying to balance like what are the opportunities that we can solve with this incredible new technology, but then while we manage the risk and mitigate that, and then we can have a transparent dialogue around what that balance is. So things that we have never been able to solve before, large models and AI's computational power. So one is a flood forecasting model. So I used to live in India for 3.5 years, and you know, in the monsoon season, which is kind of now, it's just like this deluge of rain, right? And then like city comes to a standstill and like this tremendous landslides in especially the rural parts of the world. So an AI model can build with satellite imagery a hydrological model that allows us to predict floods up to 7 days in advance, right? And that was like 48 hours, maybe just 2 years ago. But the more computational power has allowed us to build more powerful models. And effectively, we can evacuate like up to 460 million people who live in these rural areas because you can evac them early, right? I think that's like a really powerful use case. So I guess maybe the answer is to your question is kind of like, how do we have a conversation that balances also both the possibilities and also the risk, right? As a collective. Because I think we don't want to have it one-sided either way. Right?
Yeah, because I was going to go to my next question, which almost is like, you know, if we see some really harmful effects of AI, will some societies end up, you know, completely cutting it off from their own society?
I find it hard to imagine that. Never say never, I suppose, but I find it hard to conceive that a society would cut it off completely when there is a reasonable way to kind of thread the line.
Sort of the same dilemma that we have for every new technology that comes out. I mean, like with the abacus or and with the calculator and your graphic calculator, you know, all of this, it will definitely help you in your work, right? But at what point do we draw the line and say that this is human generated and I actually use my brains to think of this?
I think to add, there's a sense that I think we need to keep upgrading ourselves. And I mean, not to parrot the Skills Future model, but I do think that there is merit in that. Like my team, we tell ourselves that actually, you know, our work is like thinking work, right? Or whatever it is. But if we don't figure out how to use these AI tools to support ourselves and clear our plate to do some higher order stuff and keep doing that in a dynamic way, actually, we're also going to be out of a job. I mean, like, I just want to be quite clear about the fact that it is also about continuously figuring out the next software that's going to write that. Because it does free my time to do other things that I can apply myself to. So it's not a static idea.
Okay, then I think, right, if we're talking about, upskilling and just educating ourselves more, if I were a youth right now and, I'm choosing my degree or my diploma, I'll probably start thinking like, what, is a course that I would study that might not become relevant in 5 years, in 10 years because of AI. What are your thoughts on that?
Probably wouldn't have done protein biochemistry the same way I did it. I think everybody would need to be equipped with like the fundamentals of some AI literacy. I'm not going to say like everybody be a coder, computer science. I don't think so. But then coupled to that, I think to remember to sharpen the soft skill and the human elements that will never be replaced.
And AI is scary. It definitely has the potential to do a lot of our everyday work right now, but it doesn't mean that we have to view it as an adversary, but rather viewing it as a tool to say, okay, right now I have an essay to write. How is this going to help me generate the first cut, or even like help me find my sources even quicker? AI is built upon everyone's collective thoughts, right? Yeah. And so if you think about it, everyone has access to the information as well. So you have access, and you have access, and how do we differentiate ourselves then?
Okay, so I find it interesting that we were discussing the global diversions of all these rules and regulations because I was about to ask, NYC's Asia Ready Exposure Program, right, can really help you to gain hands-on experience on how other countries are regulating and innovating the AI industry. So do you think learning from other countries is key in maintaining a healthy AI ecosystem?
100%. If I can maybe say that 1,000%, I think we really have to keep our eyes open around like what is innovating in the markets around us. I think it's so vibrant.
Yeah, and I think like there's so many different countries that that have different ways of approaching new technology, not just AI per se, but integrating it into their everyday lives. Like China, for instance, right, they started using QR codes to pay for vegetables at wet markets. Right, long before, I mean, like a lot of other economies did that as well, right? And so it's really great to see how different cultures are approaching new technology and integrating it into their everyday lives and say that, hey, actually it's not so scary. It provides clear benefit to me, and like, okay, let's just use it, right? And see what happens. Right? And it's so great to understand people's different risk tolerances, right, and different cultures in trying to see, oh, maybe this can help me create new songs, right, in that local language, in that local context. Having that global exposure really, really helps.
I think, and maybe just to be a bit risque on this, I think it's also getting out of our comfort zone of Singapore and feeling like
bubble, right? But then you tarik.
I have to be a little bit PC, I feel, but just knowing that other markets will eat our lunch. I mean, and I think we need to know where we are relative to other folks. Like, I mean, we think that we're pretty advanced from a digital payment standpoint, but like India is far ahead of us. Like, it's helpful. And we need to know that, right? I mean, the market is also enormous. So in the spirit of only the paranoid survive, I think it's incumbent that everyone in Singapore gets out there and figures out where we stand. I think
in fact, I remember it being a huge wake-up call because everybody had a certain impression of China before their modernization, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly we realized we are so behind on this QR thing, we are so behind on peer-to-peer payments.
I think also recognizing that a lot of the news we get, a lot of the sources we get come from English-speaking economies. But so many of these new technologies are coming out from countries that maybe we only just don't know about it because of the language barrier. So going there and being able to see it and experience it for yourself.
Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, so vibrant. Like, I think we've got to,
and they're so excited about it as well. Yeah, so going there, experiencing it for yourself definitely is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. You should go.
I think at least more than once in a lifetime I will go. Right?
Multiple times, go multiple times.
Yes, exactly.
WTF is brought to you by the National Youth Council's Asia Ready Exposure Program in partnership with the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. So the AEP widens youth perspectives and encourages appreciation for ASEAN and regional affairs. So if you want to broaden your cultural horizons, you can check out the link below. Okay, thank you guys for joining us today, Rachel and Sean.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Yeah,
we're going to do a fun closing, so you join me.
No, we are all doing a fun closing, but it's just that you all don't know the lyrics, so you got to figure it out. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast. You all found the perfect spot. Okay.
Confirm.
We learned so much today about
AI.
Yay! Thank you very much.
Well done, singer-songwriter Annette Lee, everybody.
Guitar just for 10 seconds, of every episode.